Tom had always taken pride in his little slice of paradise. Nestled just beyond the edge of the local HOA community, his property was modest but perfect. A well-kept garden, a small orchard, and most importantly, a private well that supplied fresh water for everything from drinking to irrigation. For years, it had worked flawlessly, giving him independence and peace. That peace shattered one Monday morning when a thick envelope arrived in his mailbox, stamped with the HOA's official seal. Tom's brow furrowed as he opened it. The notice was blunt. He was ordered to stop drawing water from his well immediately. According to the HOA, his well usage violated community standards and could potentially affect property values within their jurisdiction. Ignoring the letter was not an option. Threats of fines, legal action, and even liens loomed over him. Tom blinked, incredulous. He wasn't even part of their HOA. Their golf course spread out luxuriously in the distance, watered meticulously every day by sprinklers drawing from the same aquifer. Meanwhile, he was forbidden from using his own water on his land. It felt absurd, infuriating, and most importantly, unfair. He stepped out onto his porch, looking toward the lush greens of the HOA's golf course, the sprinklers hissing rhythmically. The injustice stung. How could they dictate what he did with a well entirely on his property while indulging in their extravagant watering practices? His mind raced. Tom wasn't a confrontational man by nature, but he also knew a challenge when he saw one. The letter had sparked something in him, a determination not just to defend his rights, but to make sure the HOA understood that the same water they took for granted wasn't theirs to control. That afternoon, Tom began planning his response, a strategy that would turn the HOA's own rules against them in ways they never anticipated. The moment Tom finished reading the letter, it was clear the HOA wasn't bluffing. They cited supposed community rules, claiming that even neighbors just outside their borders could impact overall property values, groundwater levels, and the aesthetic harmony of the area. According to them, his well water usage posed a risk to the community's landscaping, homes, and, ironically, their golf course. Tom laughed under his breath, but it was a tense laugh. The letter threatened escalating fines, legal action, and even potential liens on his property if he continued using his own well. It was as if the HOA thought jurisdiction extended far beyond reality. Their authority, at least in their minds, was absolute. Adding insult to injury, the HOA hinted at constant monitoring. They suggested neighborhood inspectors would check his property to ensure compliance, implying he could be watched at any time. Tom felt the familiar sting of being targeted, not because he'd done anything wrong, but because he represented a challenge to their power. He glanced toward the HOA's golf course again, seeing the sprinklers working overtime to keep the greens lush and perfect. Every drop of water he was banned from using seemed to flow freely for their pleasure. It wasn't just unfair, it was hypocrisy at its finest. Tom's mind began to churn. He could comply and watch the HOA continue to flaunt their privileges, or he could fight back using the only tools they couldn't touch, the law, logic, and the very resource they wanted to control. He had a quiet smile. If they thought this was intimidation, they were in for a surprise. Word of the HOA's actions spread quickly through the surrounding neighborhood. Some residents were shocked that the board would target someone outside their jurisdiction. "They can't do that," one neighbor muttered, shaking her head while watering her own garden. Others seemed intimidated, wary of speaking up for fear of becoming the next target of Karen's relentless enforcement. Tom noticed a mixture of curiosity and concern whenever he went about his daily chores. Neighbors whispered across fences, giving sympathetic glances but often choosing to remain on the sidelines. The HOA's intimidation campaign was effective in creating a climate of fear, but it also sparked quiet resentment. Meanwhile, HOA representatives made occasional inspections, driving slowly past his property and scrutinizing his water usage. Tom maintained a calm demeanor, refusing to escalate tensions unnecessarily. Instead, he quietly documented each encounter, noting dates, times, and any overstepping behavior. Seeing the HOA flaunt their control while he was being punished for nothing more than exercising his legal rights only strengthened Tom's resolve. He realized that the community's reliance on the aquifer for their lush golf course gave him leverage they hadn't considered. The injustice that had begun with a single letter was now a simmering battle of wits, with Tom prepared to turn their own excesses against them. By the end of the week, the neighborhood buzzed with speculation. Who really had the right to use water, and who was overstepping? Tom's plan was beginning to take shape, and soon, the HOA would learn that trying to bully someone with facts on their side could have unintended consequences. Tom realized that facing down the HOA would require more than just patience. He began researching his legal rights regarding water usage. Consulting a water rights attorney, he discovered that, as the owner of a private well, he had full legal authority over the water on his property. The HOA's claims were baseless. They had no jurisdiction to restrict his well, nor could they legally fine him for using it. While reviewing the neighborhood maps and HOA documents, Tom noticed something important: the HOA's golf course. The lush green paradise they proudly maintained relied heavily on the same underground aquifer his well tapped into. If the water supply was restricted or monitored properly, their prized fairways could suffer as a consequence of their overuse. An idea began forming. He could protect his rights while exposing the HOA's hypocrisy and dependence on the very resource they tried to control. It would require careful planning, documentation, and a strategy that combined legal knowledge with practical leverage. Tom started tracking the HOA's water usage, noting the time sprinklers ran, the volume of water drawn, and the effect of any restrictions on the landscape. By gathering this evidence, he was preparing to demonstrate that the HOA's own policies were unsustainable and unfair, giving him the upper hand in the impending showdown. For the first time since receiving that threatening letter, Tom felt a surge of confidence. The HOA had underestimated him, and he was ready to turn the tables in a way they would never expect. Tom's plan was simple but strategic. He continued using his well water for legitimate personal purposes while documenting every detail meticulously. Each time the HOA's sprinklers ran on their golf course, he recorded the duration, frequency, and estimated water volume. He even installed a small flow meter at his well to compare usage and prove that the HOA's operations relied far more heavily on groundwater than his personal consumption. Next, Tom contacted the local water authority, presenting his documentation and highlighting the potential overuse by the HOA. He emphasized that the board's attempts to control his private well were baseless, while their golf course was drawing excessive amounts from the same aquifer. The authorities took note and began monitoring the situation, introducing restrictions that would ensure fair distribution of water. Meanwhile, Tom shared his findings with a few neighbors quietly, not to incite panic, but to show the factual imbalance between his usage and the HOA's lavish irrigation. Word of the situation began spreading, and more people started questioning the HOA's fairness. As the week went on, the HOA's golf course showed the first signs of strain. Sprinklers had to run shorter cycles due to water allocation restrictions, and some fairways began showing patches of dryness. Karen and her board members were visibly flustered, realizing their privilege was being curtailed, not by confrontation, but by legal leverage and careful documentation. Tom watched quietly from his porch, knowing that the battle wasn't about spite, but about holding the HOA accountable. Every drop of water that trickled onto his property was a reminder that sometimes patience, knowledge, and a bit of strategy could turn the tables against even the most overbearing powers. The following week, the HOA began feeling the first real consequences of their actions. Restrictions imposed by the water authority, combined with Tom's careful documentation, meant that their golf course was no longer getting unlimited water. Sprinklers ran shorter cycles, fairways started showing brown patches, and the once lush greens began to fade. Karen and the board members were visibly flustered. They had never anticipated that trying to control a private well could backfire so spectacularly. Neighbors noticed the changes too. whispering among themselves as they observed the HOA's prized property deteriorating. What had been a symbol of prestige now highlighted the board's arrogance and overreach. Tom kept meticulous notes and videos, ensuring he could prove the link between the HOA's overuse and the damage caused by the restrictions. He didn't gloat or confront them directly. The results spoke for themselves. The irony was delicious. While the HOA tried to bully him over a few gallons of water, their own lavish practices left them vulnerable to natural consequences. By the end of the week, Karen was scrambling to explain the Browning fairways to members and residents alike. Her threats to Tom had fallen flat, replaced by frustration and public embarrassment. The HOA had learned a hard lesson. Power without accountability and without respect for legal boundaries could crumble fast, especially when nature itself sided with reason. Tom looked on quietly, satisfied. His rights were intact, his property untouched, and the HOA finally realized that control could not be imposed unjustly. With the HOA scrambling to repair their once pristine golf course, Tom finally felt a sense of calm. His well remained untouched, his garden thrived, and the neighborhood had witnessed the consequences of Karen's overreach. The board had learned, albeit painfully, that legal rights and natural resources cannot be overridden by arrogance or intimidation. Neighbors who had once stayed silent began to speak up. Tom's quiet perseverance had empowered them, showing that standing firm, armed with facts and patience, could challenge even the most overbearing HOA. Karen's reputation suffered further. Her threats exposed as hollow, and her authority questioned by residents who had admired her control. Tom reflected on the entire ordeal. He had never set out to humiliate anyone. His goal was simply to protect his property and uphold his rights. Yet in doing so, he had revealed a crucial truth. Abuse of power often carries hidden vulnerabilities, and those who respect the law and nature have the ultimate leverage. Looking over his flourishing property, Tom smiled. The HOA had learned a lesson in accountability the hard way, and he had secured peace without confrontation. And for anyone watching, how far would you go to defend your rights against someone? Misusing authority. Sometimes it's not brute force or anger that wins the day, but strategy, knowledge, and letting nature do its part. The story leaves a powerful takeaway. Standing up to unjust power doesn't require recklessness, just awareness and patience.